Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. Continuing on with college football week 6. Got a Big 12 matchup here. Kansas, Arizona State in Tempe. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
All right, like I said, Kansas is on the road in Arizona State for this one. Sun Devils are laying 3. Looks like all the 3.5s are gone. So Arizona State's now laying 3. Total sitting at 50.5 or 50, depending on your sports book. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to this data that I don't trust, action's coming in heavy on the Arizona State side. Over 70% of the tickets, over 70% of the money on Arizona State. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup. We'll start with the Kansas offense. As we know, this is an offense that relies on running the ball. They're 46th in run frequency so far. They've done a really good job with it. They're sitting at 21st in yards per carry, 25th in success rate, 13th in effective rush. Offense is back at 41st in OFEI, which is definitely disappointing. But that hasn't been the fault of the run game. That's really on Jaylen Daniels, who's really off to a rough start. Cannot protect the football. 802 yards, 6.2 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 8 interceptions so far. So Jaylen Daniels definitely not off to the start we expected here. And when you take a look at this Arizona State defense, at first glance you might be like, oh man, this is a really tough matchup for Kansas. Arizona State's 8th in the country in yards per carry allowed. I mean, they've played great defense against the run, 25th in run defense success rate. Look at the numbers from their 2 home games. I mean, just 1.21 yards per carry allowed in those games, 35 rushing yards per game. So in their 2 games at home in Tempe, no one was able to run the ball on Arizona State. Now, granted, Mississippi State and Wyoming, that's who those games were against. Neither team can run the football at all. Kansas rushing attack doesn't even belong in the same sentence as those 2 programs. But are we seeing this Kansas rushing attack slow down a bit? Through the first 3 games, they were averaging almost 6.4 yards per carry, over 238 rushing yards per game, over a 57% success rate. Look at their last 2 games against West Virginia and TCU. By the way, 2 teams that, I mean, those aren't elite defenses or anything. 5.27 yards per carry, 208 rushing yards per game, success rate down close to 40%. So the rushing production hasn't been quite as explosive in the last couple games against West Virginia and TCU as it looked the first few games of the season. And if you look at the DFEI ratings, I mean, Arizona State's defense is significantly better than West Virginia's and TCU's. They're at 38th. Those 2 teams are at 82nd and 78th. And it's not like Arizona State's defense hasn't seen anybody. It's not like they're racking up defensive stats against bad offenses. Look at their last 2 games. Texas State has a pretty powerful offense. I mean, they're 57th in OFEI. Texas Tech, 45th. So Kansas at 41st. That's not a huge jump in production. Maybe in terms of a rushing attack, it's a jump, but I mean, this Arizona State team, it's not like they're playing nobody. In those last 2 games against Texas State and Texas Tech, Arizona State held their own on the ground. Just 4 yards per carry, allowed 134 rushing yards per game in those 2. Now, again, these 2 offenses as a whole might be slightly comparable to Kansas, but in terms of a rushing attack alone, Kansas is on a different level. I mean, this is Devin Neal, Jaylen Daniels using his legs. This is a very good rushing attack. Texas Tech and Texas State don't really compare. So it is definitely a step up in competition, but overall, I like this Arizona State defensive front to keep the Kansas rushing attack from absolutely smoking them. That being said, I actually like the matchup for Jaylen Daniels, and I know that sounds crazy based on what we've seen from him so far this year, but Arizona State, as solid as they've been against the run, they don't have much of a pass rush. They're just 110th in the country in pressure rate, 107th in pass rush grade. This defense has not been able to generate consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and the reason that's significant, Jaylen Daniels, as bad as he's been, his struggles mostly come when he's pressured. Look at these splits here. Actually, when he's given a clean pocket, he really hasn't been that bad. It's when he's pressured, I mean, towards the bottom of college football when he receives pressure. I don't think Arizona State's going to be able to get pressure on him in this one. So as crazy as it sounds, I think Jaylen Daniels might have a big game throwing the ball, kind of like what we saw from Blake Shapen in that home game for Arizona State. I mean, Mississippi State came in here. They couldn't run the ball. We already talked about their run defense. Blake Shapen was 18 of 28, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 168 passer rating. And if you watch that game, Arizona State won, but they had an early defensive touchdown and a huge halftime lead. Mississippi State almost came all the way back. In fact, you could argue that Mississippi State looked like the better team for most of that game. So overall, on this side of the ball, I know some people are big on this Arizona State defense, and it has looked pretty good. I like Kansas to move the football. But what about on the other side? What do we think of the Arizona State offense? Well, we've seen night and day production from this unit. Right now, they're sitting at 60th in yards per play, 33rd in success rate. On the ground, 59th in yards per carry, 25th in success rate, 49th in effective rush. Unfortunately, the crazy production we saw on the ground from the first 2 weeks seems to be gone. 5.83 yards per carry, 300 rushing yards per game through the first 2 games. Look at the rushing numbers from their last 2 games. I mean, Scatterbo just isn't doing it anymore. In their last 2 games, just 2.71 yards per carry, under 100 rushing yards per game. A 17.2% success rate is terrible. So this run game that looks so dominant in the first couple of weeks for Arizona State just hasn't looked like that at all. And by the way, Kansas, I know they're not really branded as a defensive program. They've actually been playing pretty solid defense against the run. 49th in the country in yards per carry, 67th in success rate isn't great, 33rd in effective rush. We saw Kansas matched up against 2 explosive rushing attacks, UNLV and West Virginia, 2 very dynamic, very good rushing attacks. In those games, they allowed 165 rushing yards per game, just 4.18 yards per carry. So they held their own against 2 very good rushing attacks. Both I would consider better than the Arizona State rushing attack. The problem with this Kansas defense has been, the secondary. They can't cover anybody. On their last 2 games against West Virginia and TCU, they're allowing over 325 passing yards per game, almost 10 yards per attempt, and over a 50% success rate per dropback. So they're really struggling to defend the pass right now. But here's the thing. Sam Leavitt doesn't really scare me as a thrower. He's got 855 yards on the season, 7.7 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, picks, an F big-time throw rate, meaning he's not getting the ball downfield much. He didn't do anything through the air in that Mississippi State game, just 69 yards passing, 3.5 yards per attempt, under a 24% success rate per dropback. And since then, okay, maybe he's been a little bit better, but still, yeah, he's completing over 60% of his passes, 264 passing yards per game, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and a 125.8 passer rating. So, look, this Kansas pass defense looks terrible, but Garrett Green and Josh Hoover, okay, they're both much better than Sam Leavitt in terms of throwing the ball. So I actually like the matchup for Kansas defense, which is why I took one of those 3.5s. Unfortunately, I think they're gone now, but I'd still play Kansas at 3. I think this should come down to the wire. I actually think Kansas is live. I think Kansas wins this game. I know some of you might be hesitant to bet Kansas. I had them as a top bet. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and they blew that lead. Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. They blew that lead to West Virginia, an 11-point lead with like 3 minutes. Oh, my God. It makes me sick to even talk about it. So Kansas broke my heart a couple weeks back, but I do think they win this game. So getting +3, it's a must play for me. I'm on Kansas. I got the 3.5, still play it at 3. If you'd like to see all the bets I have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on open bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone else on the staff here. Also, if you sign up to Sauce Network Plus, it comes with access to the Discord, and you can participate in the weekly betting league. $150 and one of these trophies go to the winner every single week. So if you're interested, head over to the website and sign up. Live show Saturday morning, 10 a.m. up to kickoff. We'll go through as many games as we can. Sunday morning, 11 a.m. up to kickoff. We'll do all the NFL games. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let's have ourselves a good college football week 6. I need it, man. This season just off to such a terrible start. Hopefully things turn around. Thank God the NFL's been going well. But yeah, let's have ourselves a good one. Please remember to bet responsibly. Talk to you in the Discord.